Tonight on the Worldview Weekend Hour, the coronavirus overreach by the government examined through the lens of the Fabian Window. A digital dollar, that's what's been proposed in one of the initial pieces of legislation. Do you know what that is? It's the end of cash eventually. It's put out by the Federal Reserve. They'll track every transaction, and once they tie it to a biometric and social credit score, could they lock you down? Also, we'll look at who are the players behind this. Who was giving this information to Donald Trump? And you might be shocked at the worldview of one of the leading hospitals in America that they were reading from, which might be why, once Donald Trump found out the truth, reversed his position on keeping everything closed down till later in the spring or summer. My friends, this is a vital broadcast and a special broadcast. Don't go away and invite your friends. The Worldview Weekend Hour begins right now.
This is WVW, Broadcast Network News and Commentary with Brannon, Howse.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Weekend Hour and a special live broadcast here on a Wednesday night, March 25th at 9 p.m. Central Time, if you're watching it live. If you're not, then you should have joined our text alert list and you would have gotten notified. But my friends, I was up till 3 a.m. this morning studying, what the globalists are doing. And I want you to know what they're doing is really quite predictable, and it has all been laid out, quite frankly, for us through something I've been warning about for years, the Fabian Window. The Fabian Socialist Society and their Fabian Window, created by George Bernard Shaw in 1910. I've been talking about this for years and years. And my friends, yesterday morning when I was doing some of my research and I heard what Congressman Clyburn, a Democrat from South Carolina, said, I thought, wow, whether he knows it or not, that is virtually coming right out of the Fabian Window. And then in my research this week, my friends, I found out that the Rockefeller Foundation did a dress rehearsal for such a scenario as the coronavirus back in 2010. Now, I was given this information on Saturday. I didn't even have time to talk about it until Wednesday, today, on my radio show. But since then, I have compiled some other information. Who were the folks in the White House listening to when it came to the stats of the death rate in relation to the coronavirus? Well, one of them was a hospital out of London. I saw the report. It was a PDF. I read it. But then today, I took several hours and I began to research this hospital. Who are they? What's their worldview? Who do they align themselves with? And once you realize that, you realize they're tied in with the globalist, even the Fabian Socialist Society. And so, my friends, the question tonight is, did the globalist, the World Health Organization, which is apparently closely tied to China, did all of these groups working in concert together, the medical deep state, set up a trap for President Trump? And when he found out what was going on, is this maybe why he's reversed course so fast and calling for opening up the country by Resurrection Sunday? We'll talk about the digital dollar. Did you know that the legislation being proposed, even tonight, the 1,000-page bill, emergency package, well, one of the original drafts had a digital dollar. Do you know about the digital dollar? It's a Federal Reserve digital dollar. How might this all be used when you combine social credit scores and biometrics to, well, deal with dissenters, to control the population? And my friends, back in 1995, I wrote my second book, Reclaiming a Nation at Risk. And in that book, I talked about Dangans, the Dangan, as they have in China, a file opened on young kids. And it follows them through their whole life, their education, their job, their career. And a review of an applicant's Dangan determines whether or not they can get a job or promoted or travel. And now we have social credit scores. Well, when I warned about that in my book in 95, people thought that was crazy to say that would ever come to America. But here we are today with social credit scores. Now, we did a whole show on this a few weeks ago. You'll find it at WVWTV.com. But what I have found out, some of the folks behind the digital dollar are some of the same people and organizations behind the idea of biochipping everybody for vaccines and to deal with the immigration crisis. Wait a minute. The ability to travel, immigration and movement, vaccines controlling you, and wait a minute, a digital dollar, economics. You see how it's all coming together? And I'll show you who the players are. And not only will I show you who the players are, I'll provide you tonight with the screenshots. Look at this first screenshot right here. This is a news article from this past week, March 23rd, 2020. Democrat representative told colleagues coronavirus bill is tremendous opportunity to restructure things to fit our vision. Now, folks, when I saw that, I immediately thought of this right here, the Fabian Window. Again, I have showed this in documentaries and presentations and speeches and radio shows and TV shows for years and years and years. The Fabian Window, but it tells us so much. For those who maybe don't know, let's go through this real quick. The Fabian Window. You see two men, one in red and one in green, banging on a hot earth with these hammers. You'll notice one is holding it with a pair of tongs. It's on fire. See, it's red hot, and it's on an anvil. And look what it says at the very top of the page. Remold it near to the heart's desire. Doesn't that sound a lot like what the congressman said? This package, this legislation, is going to give us the ability to accomplish what we want to accomplish. Isn't that what he said? Indeed it is, and that's why it reminded me of the Fabian Window. But wait a minute, there's the fire behind the guy in the red coat. See the fire there? It's some kind of crisis. The hot earth, it's on fire. It's come out of some kind of crisis. But let me ask you something. Did they exacerbate the crisis? Did they make the crisis worse? Indeed, I think they did. Look at the guy on the far left in the purple robe. What's he doing? Well, that appears to be a bellow. He seems to be pumping wind or air onto the fire. Now, why would he be doing that? To make the fire bigger, just like a blacksmith might do, right? He's making the fire bigger in order to put, well, that wind in there, that air in there to bolster the fire. That's what some people say he's doing there. Other people may have another opinion, but that's what many people say he's doing there. He's bolstering the fire. He's making it bigger. He's taking a crisis and he's making it a bigger crisis. He's exploiting a crisis. And once they pull the hot earth out of this fire, it's now been conditioned. It's been set up to be remolded near to their desire. Of course, you notice the logo of the wolf in sheep's clothing above the hot fire. Then you notice them praying at the bottom. These are Fabian Society folks, people who belong to the Fabian Society, which was started in London in 1883. And they're praying to a stack of Fabian essays or books. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But isn't that what it sounds like there at the top of the Fabian Window? Remold it nearer to the heart's desire. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like what the congressman said? He told his caucus members last week that the bill was, quote, a tremendous opportunity to restructure things to fit our vision, remold the country nearer to our heart's desire. Well, here's a quote from my friend, the late John Stormer, a good friend of mine who wrote the book None Dare Call It Treason. He passed away last year, and he, by the way, I have several interviews with him in the Situation Room. If you're a Situation Room member, you'll find my interviewing him on my radio show several times. Just type in John Stormer into our search engine. But here's what John Stormer wrote in his excellent book, None Dare Call It Treason. By the way, which Ronald Reagan, he told me, used to buy it up by the case and pass it out when it came out. This was many, many, many years ago. I think it's like a 75th anniversary of the book coming out a few years ago. And Ed Meese said that Reagan used to quote Stormer in his cabinet meetings. So listen to what John Stormer wrote, quote, Fabians worked for world revolution, not through uprising of the workers, but through indoctrination of young scholars. The Fabians believed that eventually these intellectual revolutionaries would acquire power and influence in the official and unofficial opinion-making and power-wielding agencies of the world. Then they could quietly establish a socialistic one world order. That's what Fabians want. They want socialism by evolution. Not necessarily revolution, but socialism by evolution over time. Now that's a Fabian in contrast to a Marxist who wants outright revolution. They want revolution now. But the Fabians will allow the Marxists to do their dirty work for them. And be the revolutionaries and overthrow the government. And then they come back in as the calmer, cooler scholars and then say, well, wait a minute, we need to have a little reasoning here. But they let the Marxists go out there and have revolution, and that's the antithesis, the thesis and the antithesis. And they put everybody into this scissor strategy, and they squeeze them. And then the Fabians in their scholarly way say, wait, slow down. We got to think about civil liberties. And they exploit the crisis. They were happy to let the revolutionary Marxists do that. But their strategy, unlike the Marxists, is not outright revolution. The Fabians want socialism by evolution, not revolution, over time. They exploit a crisis as it comes up, and they move slowly. In fact, their logo for a long time was a turtle. They were willing to move slowly. Or as Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist, talked about, the slow march through the institutions, which the folks at the Frankfurt School, those Marxists, those cultural Marxists learned that same thing, that revolution was better if you changed the people's values and worldview slowly over time with a long march through the institutions versus outright revolution. But it doesn't mean the two groups won't work together. Let one group kick it down the can down the road, and then the Fabian Socialists come in with any crisis they can find and exploit it, and people won't even know what's going on. One famous Fabian Socialist was John Maynard Keynes, from which we had Keynesian economics. John Maynard Keynes said that we can steal the majority of the people's wealth through a continuous process of inflation, and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. Well, my friends, we're about to get a lesson 101 on inflation if we haven't already had it, because this $2 trillion stimulus package well, that's just a drop in the bucket to the trillions of dollars the feds have been pumping into the markets, to the overnight market, known as the repurchasing market or the repo market, short-term loans overnight from bank to bank. We're talking about billions in the last few months going into that. So when you add up what our government's doing with our debt already, over 23 trillion, that's on record. You add the off-record debt, we're over 100 trillion with on-record, off-record debt. And now you add what they're doing with this $2 trillion package that we're all waiting to read, as it's not even passed as of being on the air tonight. And this is going to cause inflation. And that's what the Keynesians want. That's what the Fabians want. Steal the majority of the people's wealth by a continuous process of inflation, and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. They're inflating the currency and decreasing your purchasing power. Now, when the Federal Reserve, which neither is federal nor has any reserves, and when I say federal, they were given a federal charter, but they are private banks. 1913 they were created, and now we see the vast expansion of our money supply. And then, of course, we have Nixon in 1971 who closed the gold window. We went off the gold standard, but Nixon closed the gold window. And why he did that was to preserve our gold from being, handed over to other countries, because we allowed them to turn in cash for silver and gold. So he closed the gold window in 1971. As we'll see in a minute, inflation and the printing of money really took off after that. Not that there wasn't money printing going on before that or inflation, but after 1971, it skyrocketed, which is why if any of your parents or grandparents have any old National Geographic or Time magazine or any of those old magazines from the 1970s and 80s, go flip through them and see what they're selling a car for. Look how much a brand new car cost from the 1980s till 2020. You'll be shocked. That's what we call inflation. 1913, the Federal Reserve comes along, and today the dollar has about 3 cents in purchasing power to what it once did. Here in the great state of Tennessee, we had a guy who became president, Andrew Jackson, who warned against a central bank, did away with it, got censured, and said, don't ever do this again. The great threat to our country is not from without anymore, as the bravery of our gallant sons is known worldwide. It is from within. And he's talking about money supply and bankers. Be very careful. Well, these are Fabians, many of them. But again, the Fabians, the Socialists, the Internationalists, the Globalists, the Statists, the Marxists, the Neo-Marxists, whatever you want to call them, they all work in concert together. They're all looking to get a piece of the pie and in some leadership. Well, what is this overreach from the coronavirus caused to happen? It's given an expansion of government, and the American people are being greatly tested, I think, to see how much will they put up with. I hear of people being pulled over and being asked in states up north, where are you on your way to? Is this essential business that you're doing? Really? Where's your constitutional right? Churches can't meet, no more than 10 people, or maybe none. Again, where's your constitutional right here? Where has been the trial? Where has been the due process to do this? And yet, I wonder if the globalists and the change agents and neo-Marxists in America aren't testing Americans to see how much we'll put up with. And may I say, up till now, we failed, because I don't hear enough people screaming about what they're doing. Now, I was all for being cautious with this coronavirus from talking about it starting in January on our show, because I know the Communist Chinese Party. I know what they're like. I know about their level 4 biolab. I know about pandemics and other things. In my documentary Siege, which I don't see here, in my documentary Siege, I have a whole section on communism, a huge section on communism. I think pretty much the whole 8.5 hours is about that. But I have a section on bioweapons and chemical warfare and that kind of thing. So when I heard about this coming out of potentially a level 4 biolab, whether on purpose or a mistake, I immediately was cautious because we don't know what it is. But then we started hearing death rates that were very troubling. And we started talking about, can the hospitals handle this? And we watched what happened to Italy. But it appears now, as we'll see as we conclude tonight's show, the death rate seems to be lower. Now we're still in the middle of it. We must be cautious. People who are at high risk should be cautious. Even young people are getting this and dying. But does it require us shutting down our entire nation? When we had polio outbreaks and young people ended up being in iron lungs, did we shut down every school and every business in America? I mean, these things have happened before. What is going on? I believe you can't let a good crisis go to waste. You must take a crisis, pump some wind under that crisis, build up the fire, and cause this crisis to get out of hand, and then you can remold it near to the heart's desire, just like we're seeing from Congressman Clyburn of South Carolina, just like we see in the Fabian Window. And what do we see now? This is just one of many examples I could give you. LA County Sheriff orders closure of gun stores, releases 1,700 inmates. And I could give you example after that, after another, where that's happening all over the country. Now, here is the document I became aware of as of this past Saturday. Scenarios for the future of technology and international development. Notice who is part of this: the Rockefeller Foundation, and of course the Global Business Network. This was again May 2010. Here we are in 2020. This scenario, and they were running different scenarios from hacking to other things. And not that their scenarios weren't legitimate, not that we shouldn't practice and be aware of these kind of scenarios, but as you will hear tonight, they clearly were planning on how to take advantage of the crisis. You can't let a good crisis go to waste. You can use it to remold the society nearer to the heart's desire. So I'm not downplaying the idea of practicing for scenarios and having emergency preparedness and being ready. But as you'll see, they were openly talking about how they were going to exploit it. And remember, this was in 2010. It reads like it's happening today. The Rockefeller Report, and I have it right here in front of me, and the Rockefeller Report, which is here it is right here. So I have the whole report in front of me, but frankly, what I'm about to share with you is the best part of the report. Now, this wording may be too small for some of you to read, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. But I want to prove to you that this is what it says, and you can look it up yourself. Lockstep, a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. Here's what it says. Now, this again is a fake scenario. This is the fake scenario. It's supposed to have occurred in 2012. Remember, they're writing this in 2010. In 2010, the pandemic that the world had been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, this new influenza strain, originating from wild geese, was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic-prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed when the virus streaked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months. The majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economics. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt, debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. The pandemic blanketed the planet, though disproportionate numbers died in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central America, where the virus spread like wildfire in the absence of official containment protocols. But even in developed countries, containment was a challenge. The United States' initial policy of, quote, strongly discouraging, end quote, citizens from flying proved deadly in its leniency, accelerating the spread of the virus not just within the U.S., but across borders. However, a few countries did far better. China in particular. The Chinese government's quick imposition and enforcement of mandatory quarantine for all citizens, as well as its instant and near hermetic sealing of all borders, saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of the virus far earlier than in any other countries and enabling a swift post-pandemic recovery. Folks, what do you notice there? They're praising communist China. The document is, and you might find out in just a minute why the Rockefellers would put out a document praising China. You know what David Rockefeller himself said about China back in the early 70s? You're about to find out, but let's keep reading from the Rockefeller Report. China's government was not the only one that took extreme measures to protect its citizens from risk and exposure. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics and transnational terrorism to environmental crises and rising poverty, leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability. Citizens were more tolerant and even eager for top-down direction and oversight, and national leaders had more latitude to impose order in the ways they saw fit. In developed countries, this heightened oversight took many forms. Biometric IDs for all citizens. Can I just stop right there? The Rockefellers have been involved in biometrics, as you're going to see again, but here they are in their report in 2010 saying, hey, you can use a pandemic for people to agree to biometrics. That's exactly what ID2020.org that we just did a whole TV show on a week ago, and you can watch the whole thing at wvwtv.com. That's what that's about. Using pandemics and immigration, primarily pandemics, to get people to agree to biometrics. Let's go back to the Rockefeller Report from 2010. Biometric IDs for all citizens, for example, and tighter regulation of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national interest. In many developed countries, enforced cooperation with a suite of new regulations and agreements slowly but steadily restored both order and, importantly, economic growth. Across the developing world, however, the story was different and much more variable. And we'll just stop there. But look at, does that not sound like today? Does that not sound like, that was written in 2010 by the Rockefellers. Now look at this. Later on in the report, they talk about technology that they can use in the lockstep. Technology innovation in lockstep is largely driven by government and is focused on issues of national security and health and safety. Folks, that's how they're going to sell this tyranny to you. National security, health, and safety. Most technological improvements are created by and for developed countries, shaped by governments' dual desire to control and to monitor their citizens. In states with poor governance, large-scale projects that fail to progress abound. Then they went on to talk about some of the technology they could use. Technology trends and applications we might see. They say, scanners using advanced functional magnetic resonance imaging, so like an MRI. Technology became the norm at airports and other public areas to detect abnormal behavior that may indicate, quote, antisocial intent, end quote. Did you see what it says there, folks? That may indicate, quote, antisocial intent. Well, what is antisocial intent? Are you an individualist? Do you not agree with tyranny? Are you not for globalism? Do you believe in individual rights, the Constitution, the Constitutional Republic, the Judeo-Christian worldview? Well, my friends, that's not what we would call the kind of social standards that one should have. That's antisocial standards, antisocial intent. Really? This is not sci-fi. This is something they're actually proposing, people. Talk about your social sciences, your Brave New World, your Aldous Huxley. Well, here is an event that is called Event 2001. This is a totally different event. It occurred in October of 2019, last fall. The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. Wait a minute. Isn't the Johns Hopkins Center the one that's been putting out that map everybody shows? The coronavirus outbreak? The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in partnership with what? The World Economic Forum? Isn't that a globalist group? Wait a minute. Isn't the World Economic Forum involved in something else? Well, let's just see. Hang on. And wait a minute. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation? Really? Bill and Melinda Gates, the guy who's so big on vaccines and pandemics, is he looking to maybe take advantage of this? Huh. They hosted the event, 201, a big high-level pandemic exercise on October 18, 2019. And again, there's your players. Johns Hopkins, World Economic Forum, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. World Economic Forum. We'll get back to that in a minute because look at this. Here's a headline this week. Digital dollar, stripped from latest U.S. coronavirus relief bill, the digital dollar. Well, we'll see if it's stripped or not when it comes out. But the fact they put it in there shows you their intent. This is where they're going, folks. You now have gotten a little tip-off of where it is they want to go. And so I went to the website. When I started researching this, it brought up this website. When I put in digital dollar into the internet, here's what popped up. Digital Dollar Project. So I started reading. Wait a minute. The Digital Dollar Project is a partnership between Accenture and the Digital Dollar Foundation to advance exploration of a United States central bank digital currency. The purpose of the project is to encourage research and public discussion on the potential advantages of a digital dollar, convene private sector thought leaders and actors, and propose possible models to support the public sector. Listen now, the project will develop a framework for potential practical steps that can be taken to establish a dollar, again known as a central bank digital currency. But wait a minute, who's going to be involved? Accenture. And I thought to myself, Accenture is involved in the idea of a digital dollar. Well, that's interesting. Continued reading, sure enough, David Treat, right on the website, says he serves on the board of this. He's one of the leaders of the Digital Dollar Project. But wait a minute. What else has Accenture been involved in? The show we did last week at wvwtv.com on biometrics and ID2020.org. And sure enough, right in his bio on the Digital Dollar Project, it says he serves on the board of directors for what? ID 2020 Alliance. He's a member of the World Economic Forum. Wait a minute, the World Economic Forum? Oh yeah, that's the group that was working with Bill and Melinda Gates on practicing last fall of 2019 for a pandemic. Huh, a lot of the same players. And then, of course, this is ID 2020 that we see. And oh, look, Economic Forum in Davos is involved. Wait a minute, you got Accenture involved, you got Economic Forum involved in ID 2020, you got some of the same players involved in that were also involved in the Digital Dollar Project, like Accenture. You've got Bill and Melinda Gates, and the Economic World Forum involved in a pandemic exercise last fall. Well, this is working out very nicely. You can't let a good crisis go to waste. Oh, and then we see involved in ID 2020 is Microsoft. Of course, we know Bill Gates, his connection to that. Well, a lot of the same players, is it not? Oh, wait a minute. Look, we also see on ID2020.org who else is involved? Not only Accenture, but the Vaccine Alliance, Gavi. Oh, and there is the Rockefeller Foundation. The same people that put out this report in 2010 on how they could use a pandemic for bigger top-down government and controls, including some kind of scan before you can go to the airport or public places to see if you might exhibit antisocial intent. A lot of the same players. Yeah, and I wonder what David Rockefeller, he's dead now, but I wonder what he said about China. Oh, well, here we go. April 10th, 1973, the New York Times, article by David Rockefeller, From a China Traveler's was the headline. And I'm just going to pull out one paragraph. That's a screenshot to prove it really is what it is. Here's what David Rockefeller wrote, New York Times, 1973. Quote, one is impressed immediately by the sense of national harmony, talking about China, from the loud patriotic music at the border onward. There is very real and pervasive dedication to Chairman Mao and Maoist principles. Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, well, you mean maybe millions and millions dead? It has, and lack of freedom, it has obviously succeeded not only in producing more efficient and dedicated administration, but also in fostering high morale and community of purpose, end quote. There's David Rockefeller praising the Chi-Coms. Yeah, and their one-child policy, they're imprisoning political dissidents, they have to have a licensed church. How many Christians are in prison tonight in China? How many have been killed? How many millions have been killed? And yet, David Rockefeller says this is a utopia. Now you wonder why these groups are working with China and the World Health Organization. These groups love China because they're all united in the worldview of the communist, the Marxist. And of course, the globalist will use the Chinese. Do you hear what I'm saying? The globalist will use the communist Chinese. The globalist will use any of the Marxists, anywhere, to accomplish their job. The same way they'll use the Islamist. They'll use the Islamist and the Marxist to be their junkyard dogs, to create crisis, to destroy things, and then they walk in and offer the more scholarly, middle-of-the-road approach, the Fabian approach. Oh, we just want socialism by evolution, not revolution. But they're working in concert because the road ends the same place. Well, here's the 2002 memoir of David Rockefeller. Again, I'll take a screenshot of it so you can show that I'm not taking it out of context. He says, quote, for more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents such as my encounter with Castro to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we're part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalist and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty. and I'm proud of it, end quote. David Rockefeller, in his memoir, 2002, page 405. Yeah, so now you might understand why the Rockefeller Foundation is involved with ID 2020 that wants to biochip everybody, connect it up with your vaccines. Oh, yeah, and there's the United Nations, as we've learned in our TV show last week at wvwtv.com. They're also involved. Back to the issue of digital dollar, because again, this was proposed in the legislation for the coronavirus stimulation bill. We'll see if it is still in there. We don't know yet, because as of tonight, it's not been released yet. But you know what they want to do, because they tried to put it in there, and that led me to find the Digital Dollar Project. And this will be, my friends, a way for them to reset the dollar. When they have all of this inflation eventually get out of hand, and maybe even worse than just inflation, some are talking hyperinflation. Well, we'll see. I don't have a crystal ball. But you cannot do this and not have inflation. And sometimes it takes 18 to 24 months for it to be baked into the cake and show up. But when they do that and destroy the dollar and debase the currency through this monetization or quantitative easing or whatever they want to call it, how are they going to reset the dollar? Because they'll have to at some point, right? Well, it'll be very easy to do if they have gone to the digital and they can do a digital reset. So let's say you have 100 grand in the bank. A digital reset might mean you now have the purchasing power of 60,000. We know that Yellen, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, after the last crisis said, yeah, bailouts, no, bail-ins, meaning we'll take a percentage of your bank account above a certain dollar, as they did in Cyprus. So if you have above a certain dollar, they'll take 30 or 40% of it. What are you going to do about it when they don't allow you to take the cash out of the bank? They put in capital controls, or better yet, what if there's no cash to take out because they've gone to a digital currency, a digital dollar, and it's backed by the Federal Reserve. It's a Federal Reserve instrument. You see how this is all working out very neatly? Here's what the Digital Dollar Project says. The Digital Dollar Project seeks to encourage the next major innovation in the U.S. currency, a digital dollar issued by the Federal Reserve System that would enjoy the full faith and credit of the U.S. government and represent a third format of central bank money in addition to banknotes and reserves. Well, you can bet the banknotes will eventually go away. Don't buy the lie, oh, this is just going to be for those who want to do this. No. It goes on to say the adoption of a digital dollar in the U.S. is seen as critical, listen now, to a possible orderly recalibration. Oh, that's a nice way to say a reset. An orderly recalibration of the dollar's attractiveness relative to the other digital currencies to support stable international monetary conditions. Oh yeah, so when the global bankers all get together at the Bank for International Settlements up there in Basel, Switzerland, because that's what the Bank for International Settlements is all about, which, by the way, the president of the European Central Bank back in, I think, April 26, 2010, off the top of my head, I think that was the date, that was when he said in his speech in New York that at the apex of the global governance would be the Bank for International Settlements, which most Americans don't even know what that is, but it's the central bank of central bankers. And by the way, Carroll Quigley, who wrote a book, a globalist, he wrote a book called Tragedy and Hope. He mentored Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton gave him a shout out at the Democratic convention in his acceptance speech. He mentored Bill Clinton. Again, Carroll Quigley wrote a book, Tragedy and Hope, spilled his guts on what the globalists wanted to do. And he said, hey, at the center of this global governance will be the Bank for International Settlements, the global bankers. Well, and now we see the Federal Reserve, which is part of that global Western industrialized banking system that meets at what are called global economy meetings, GEMs, global economy meetings, where they in concert work out the economy of the world. Well, this is going to be pretty easy for them to calibrate the dollar in America to get in line with international monetary conditions, because there'll be no paper money. You'll have yourself a digital dollar. Also going to be a great way to control people who don't want to fall in line, just lock you up and freeze you up. And by the way, when things get out of hand with the monetary system and they have to reset, that's exactly what they'll do. They'll just freeze everything in place till they figure out where to reset it and then open it back up and you'll have these digits. My guess is they like to go ahead and roll these things out now, because obviously they want to. They tried to put it in the legislation the other night. If they can go ahead and get this thing rolled out now and get people accepting it and liking it, and the more people that convert to it and get used to it, it won't be long before they just quietly start pulling currency out, and pretty soon, hey, the currency, it's dirty. It can pass diseases and pandemics and viruses, and we don't want to do that, and we need to scoop up the underground economy and tax evaders and blah, blah, blah. Really? Well, then why wouldn't we just go to a federal sales tax? That would have done all those things. Look at this inflation chart. I spent about an hour and a half the other night on this, looking for this, and finally found it. Look at that arrow. It's pointing about 1971 in there, when Nixon closed the gold window in 1971. I may have said 73 a while ago, but it should be 71 is what I should have said if I didn't. But look at that. Look at about 1971, what starts happening. Did we have inflation before that? Yeah. But look how it just takes off. Because again, he closed the gold window, and then we really started the printing the money. Well, again, look out. The digital dollar will help with this kind of thing. The adoption of a digital dollar, again, is going to help them recalibrate. A digital dollar is issued by the Fed, would enhance scope, access, diversification, and resilience in dollar payments and support retail, wholesale, and international payment use cases. Again, if you're only in this system, they got you where they want you. They can control you, right? This, my friends, is why we have urged people for, well, many years to not divest everything they have and go buy gold and silver. No, but we did say, we thought, I don't give financial advice, but I give financial opinion, and we said we thought that people should likely be, a percentage, 10% of their cash holdings, whatever you feel comfortable with after talking to a representative in this market. We personally have worked for years with Craig Smith over there at Swiss America, who you see with Neil Cavuto regularly. But we were saying our opinion was that people should have a percentage of their cash holdings in gold and silver so that they have a hedge against inflation and to be outside the system. So they lock it down, you have something. Many people in Cyprus, when things got locked down, had small little gold or silver coins. They were able to go on and buy things with them for a while there was some disruption. My guess is they want to go ahead and start putting some of this stuff in place so there is no disruption. It just rolls right into it. But of course, again, if it's all digital, they've got you. People outside the system have a little more freedom. And again, this is the advantage of gold and silver, not to mention the hedge against inflation, because again, if they decide to recalibrate the dollar and to readjust it, you could lose a good chunk of percentage of your wealth. Gold and silver will tend to go up. Reality seems to be that eventually we will go to some kind of regional or global currencies, and very likely a percentage of it will be backed by gold. Well, something's up, because I asked a couple of the guys I work with over there at Swiss America to go and do some reports for me. I gave them about 20 questions yesterday that I wanted them to answer. I have a special radio show coming out tonight at worldviewradio.com that I did with one of them, answering some of these 20 questions I asked him to go research. But one of them was I wanted to know how much gold did these countries hold, do like China and Russia and America hold. And they came back and said that America is at the top with over 8,000 metric tons of gold. I'm not so sure I buy that. When was the last time they did a check and an inventory? I'm not so sure I believe that. But let's just take that as the face value now, but be skeptical. The second country reportedly with the most gold is Germany. The third shocked me. International Monetary Fund. Over 2,800 metric tons of gold by the International Monetary Fund. Now, if you ask the average American what is the International Monetary Fund, they have no clue. They look at you like a calf looks at a new gate. They don't clue what that is. The International Monetary Fund was started in part by John Maynard Keynes, a Keynesian economist. John Maynard Keynes helped start the International Monetary Fund. They're the ones who eventually in 1969 gave us what are called special drawing rights, or SDRs, really the beginning of the foundation for some kind of global currency or basket of currencies that would come together. I'm wondering if they're going to maybe eventually go to a global currency, and it might, in some way, a percentage of it be backed by gold, so it's not just some useless fiat currency. They got to have, people want to have some kind of trust in it, so they'll back a percentage of it by gold. Why else would the International Monetary Fund be holding over 2,800 metric tons of gold? Well, there are other reasons, but that could be one. Next is Italy, France, Russia, and China. I don't buy the China number either. They supposedly have close to 2,000 metric tons. That number hasn't really changed over the last few years. So I don't think China's being, or Russia, I don't think they're being forthright in how many metric tons of gold and silver they're holding. I think they're much, much higher. They may be number one and number two. But this gives you an idea. Why are these countries and central banks around the world gobbling up gold? Because they all know what's coming, because many of them are working in concert together through the Bank for International Settlements. And those that aren't know what's going on. Well, then you figure out how much debt is China holding of ours. I think China's holding a little over $1 trillion in debt of America. They stop buying our debt. What's that going to do to our dollar? You say, well, what if we get in a war with them or something? We don't even pay them back anymore. Well, hey, guess what? They got an insurance policy against that. They've loaded their vaults up with gold. They crashed the dollar by not buying any more our debt. We get in a war with them. We say we're not even going to pay them back anymore. What do they care about the little over $1 trillion? Look how much gold they're holding. They go about with other countries destroying the dollar as the world reserve currency, the petrodollar, of which oil is traded on and pinned by that dollar. Those countries like Russia, India, China, South Africa, all working in concert together in a banking system now to try to destroy the American dollar as our strength and our sovereignty. Guess what? If they destroy the American dollar, you're likely to see gold skyrocket. That is their insurance policy, in part with the debt they hold of America. There are other ways that could happen, but that is one of them. So let's go back to the digital dollar. What is the reason for it? Ensure real-world and inclusive benefits of subsequently make broadly available a digital dollar that will constitute a liability of the Fed and form an integrated part of the money base. So again, this is all going to replace the greenback. Look at that. Monetary policy and financial stability is the reason they're claiming this, and to future-proof the greenback. China's push towards a renminbi central bank dollar currency is seen largely amid its efforts to advance their internationalization. So again, China's doing it, we're going to do it, others are doing it. Why would the U.S. digital dollar be backed by the U.S. government? An effective digital dollar should be fully functional with other Federal Reserve monies and constitute legal tender and be an obligation of the United States. Well, again, we know this is where they want to go because this is what we saw was put into the coronavirus stimulus package the other night. And it shows you, again, how all these groups can work together. They can take, again, like the Fabian Window, a crisis. They can exploit the crisis, tell us that a lot more people are going to die than we really think now is going to happen, and stir up the panic, shut down the government, shut down the, shut down businesses and the free market system. And reality is, what do we have now? Many people that won't be able to make their car payment, their bank note. We now see that commercial enterprise, commercial property is on the verge of collapsing. Some people are missing their payments. Well, how could they make their payment? Their restaurant is doing either not open or it's only doing drive-through, so they're not anywhere near doing the money they need. So again, it's almost like they took something and they exploited it. Now again, there was reason to be cautious at the beginning. And I was cautious at the beginning because I'm thinking a level 4 biolab communist China. We know what pandemics can do. Wow, what's going on here? Trump's backed them into a corner with the trade deal and this thing gets let loose. But I never dreamed that they would go to shutting down everything in America. Again, I don't want to see 1 million die. But as I've been writing the last couple of weeks, you know how many millions we're going to see die if we shut down the whole system and collapse America economically and roll to socialism? This is going to be a multi-generational thing. But I think what they've done is taken a crisis and they've exploited it and they've fanned the flames of it so they can remold it near to the heart's desire, the world. Well, look at that. There's Tony Blair unveiling the Fabian Window back in 2006. Well, of course, he's part of the Labor Party. The Labor Party and the Fabian Socialist Society are all connected. And what is Tony Blair doing, by the way? He's running the Tony Blair Faith Foundation, which seeks to bring the religions of the world together as one. Wow, it's kind of lining up, isn't it? We don't want to have any borders, some people are saying. George Soros and all these useful idiots within evangelicalism that are being funded by George Soros through the Evangelical Immigration Roundtable. They don't want any borders. They don't want any sovereignty. So you've got religious, useful idiots helping push a one world global system funded in part by George Soros. Well, that's what, of course, the Fabians want. World government, new world government, new world order. Their words, not mine. But what will you have besides world government? You'll have a world economy. How can you do that? Through digital dollars and the central banks of the industrialized world meeting and working together at the headquarters of the central banks. Basel, Switzerland, the Bank for National Settlements. So you got a one world government you can put together. You got a one world economy you can put together. Oh, wait a minute. You can have a one world religion. And who's helping with that? Tony Blair and the Tony Blair Faith Foundation, which seeks to bring the religions of the world together as one. Oh, and who's involved in helping that on the advisory board? Rick Warren. Wow. Well, here's what I warned about in my book, Grave Influence, that came out. I wrote it in 2008, came out in 2009. On page 244, I wrote, in the end, Fabian Socialists don't really want to own it if they can control it. And all they need to control it is a financial crisis that allows them to change laws, inflate the currency, and buy stock in corporations, whether you call it nationalizing an industry or corporate fascism. The result is the same, the death of freedom and private property rights. Well, that's interesting because what is this new coronavirus stimulation bill going to do? Apparently going to be buying some stocks and bonds and buying into private companies. Yeah, that's what you call corporate fascism, big government, big business, the public-private partnership. Again, wrote about it extensively in this book, 20 2009 it came out. 2009, Grave Influence. By the way, if you're a Situation Room member, you don't need to go buy it. It's subtitled 21 Radicals and Their Worldviews Ruling America from the Grave. You don't need to go buy it if you're a Situation Room member. It's archived under the Library tab as an ebook. And while I'm mentioning our Situation Room, where we have over 1,600 TV shows just like this archived, ebooks, audiobooks, transcripts, and conference DVDs, if you join, which is going to be great for you if you like TV shows like this, we have 1,600 of them, not to mention the thousands of radio shows. But if you join, you're not only going to help yourself, but it's how we support this network. We spend $3,000 a month in streaming and storage just to give you programs like this. We're building a brand new website that will launch next month, costing us $45,000 to have all that code rewritten and relaunch. And about every 7 years, we have to do that. So how do we pay for that? One of two ways. Those who support us through our tax-deductible contribution, wvwfoundation.com. When they make a tax-deductible contribution, they can do that at wvwfoundation.com. The other way is by joining our Situation Room. And when you do that, for the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year rate, I'm going to send you my documentary, Sabotage, 6 hours. I'll send that to you for free, along with my book, Marxianity, subtitled How the Evangelical Deep State and Their Useful Idiots Are Merging Marxism and Christianity Through Social Justice, White Privilege, Cultural Marxism, Illegal Immigration, Interfaith Dialogue, and more. So I would invite you to join. And when you join, like I said, you can then read my book, Grave Influence, where I told you on page 244 what the Fabian Socialists want to do, which is what they're doing now, the Socialists are, buying up stock and nationalizing things and inflating our currency. So again, I hope you'll join our VIP club at wvwtv.com/subscription, wvwtv.com/subscription. Now, again, I gave you the quote by John Maynard Keynes, a continuous process of inflation. Government, and he was a Fabian socialist, governments can confiscate secretly and unobserved an important part of wealth of their citizens. By this method, they not only confiscate, but confiscate arbitrarily. And while the process impoverishes many, it actually enriches some. I wonder who it enriches. Oh, you mean maybe the people that run the airlines? Maybe the big CEOs and the cruise ship people and all the folks that get bought out or get a bailout? And some of them will get money that they don't even have to pay back if they follow certain things like don't lay people off. Wow, nobody's going to send me that kind of money. Keynes himself admitted the process engages all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction and does it in a manner that not one man in a million can diagnose. Well, again, that's the Fabian window. Have a crisis, let it come to head, and then exploit it. Well, here at the bottom of the Fabian window, see them there at the bottom praying? Let me blow that up for you so you can see it a little easier. Here we go. Here they are praying. Now, they're praying to a stack of Fabian books. If you go and look it up, blow it up, you can read what some of them actually are. Notice the guy on the far left. He is reading what? He's reading his own book, New World for Old. New Worlds for Old. H.G. Wells is reading his own book, New Worlds for Olds. Well, what did H.G. Wells say in his book, New Worlds for Old? Well, he argues for replacing a, quote, social system based on private ownership, end quote, with a system based on the, quote, spirit of service, end quote. Wells calls for a, quote, disconnected series of protests against the extreme theories of individualism and individualist political economy, end quote. In other words, you can't be an individualist, you got to be a part of the group. You don't want to show any antisocial intent now, do you? Oh, come over here, let us scan you with an MRI before you go into the airport at a public setting to see if you may exhibit some antisocial intent. That's what the Rockefellers were proposing in their stupid document that I just showed you from back in 2010. Well, this is the same kind of thing that comes from H.G. Wells, a Fabian socialist, in his book. Notice he says we're going to replace it, the capitalist system, the free market system, private ownership, with a system based on what? Quote, spirit of service, end quote. Now that's interesting because, again, in my book, Grave Influence, I warn how Barack Obama was putting in legislation at the federal level that was going to require high school students and college students to do so many hours of community service. Mandatory volunteerism. Mandatory voluntarism. That's an oxymoron, isn't it? You got to volunteer. Oh, but it's mandatory. And they finally had to take some of the wording out because too many people caught on to it. But guess what? In there, the kids, if they did so many hours of community service, could get special money and housing and college and other things, money toward that. But the legislation actually said they couldn't be involved in things like working around their church, in charge of the praise team. I wonder why that would be. I think because whenever you're brainwashing people and sending them into social justice centers to do volunteerism, You don't want them interrupted in their brainwashing procedure by going to church. If you don't believe me, it's all documented in my book, Grave Influence. Well, this is exactly what H.G. Wells was saying. We won't call it the destruction of private property. We'll call it the spirit of service. By the way, it's due this month. A federal panel put together by Barack Obama and the late John McCain put together a panel as Obama was literally going out the door of the White House that looks at not only drafting America's daughters, yeah, you heard me right, drafting America's daughters into the selective service, but they're looking at maybe making mandatory volunteerism. Mandatory volunteerism. What an oxymoron. Here's the next book. It's called Industrial Democracy. Industrial Democracy was another book at the bottom of the Fabian Window. That was written by Sidney and Beatrice Webb. And in their book, they call for what? Organizing trade unions and collective bargaining for socialist policies and political community organizing. Wow. Wait a minute. Hang on, because this is a part of the coronavirus stimulation bill. You just wait, okay? I'm going to connect some dots here, okay? The communists have long since used the unions to do their bidding. Used the unions to implement boycotts and strikes and things to get what they want. And my friends, do you know what's in the coronavirus stimulation bill? Well, apparently, this is what's in there. Melissa, if you want to go to this screenshot here. Here's what the Washington Times says is in this bill. Dems demanding new union bargaining powers, solar tax credits, and new coronavirus aid package. Congressional Democrats are demanding an ideological wish list, including new collective bargaining powers for unions. Well, that's exactly what the Fabian Socialists want. That's exactly what they call for in their little book. Called what? Industrial Democracy. There it is. There's the book, Industrial Democracy. All right, let's go to the last one. What is that? Fabian Tracts and Essays. Now, I could do a lot on that. I don't have time. But the Fabian Tracts and Essays are a collection of different tracts and essays, pretty clear, written by the Fabians on why they need mandatory minimum wage and all kinds of other things. Socialism for millionaires. And the whole thing is nothing more than just pushing the idea of socialism, and that's their track. So this is what they're praying to at the bottom of the Fabian Window. Look at this one. A report that helped convince Trump to take coronavirus seriously projected that 2.2 million people could die in the U.S. if we don't act. Well, I saw that report, and I went and got a PDF of it and read it. But today I went and studied the hospital that did it. But look at what Business Insider said about this report, because this apparently is what caused Trump to put the brakes on and go from saying, well, it's not that big of a deal to, whoa, this is a huge deal, we better do something. President Trump's decision to take the coronavirus outbreak more seriously reportedly came after reading a report that suggested that without action to suppress cases, 2.2 million Americans could die. Trump on Monday suggested people limit social gatherings to less than 10 people and said he hopes to keep the death toll down or low enough so life can return to normal in July or August. Wait a minute, because now he's talking about getting things back in full swing by Resurrection Sunday. He's changed his mind. But then he said, the report says that he was reading this report, others are reading it, and it was in the White House they were reading this, and it was published by the Imperial College. Now, I went and looked up the Imperial College today, spent a couple hours researching them. Well, I found out on their website by poking in certain keywords in their search engine, look at that. Look at that, a report. You see who that report is with? Oh, let me blow that up for you. Oh, the Fabian Society. Now, folks, this is all original research, okay? I know someone will steal it and use it tomorrow. Probably the people that ridicule us and call us conspiracy theorists, they'll be ripping off our research tomorrow and giving us no credit because that's the losers they are. They've done that for years. But, folks, this is original research. This is what I do for hours a day and then bring it to you, and we always show you the screenshots. Why? So you know it's there. Do your own due diligence. Here it is. The Fabian Society is working with the Imperial College. And this is the group that just put out the report. Oh, if you don't shut down business, which is what socialists want, destroy private property, 2.2 million are going to die. And they're working with the Fabian Socialist Society. What else are they into? Oh, look, the Imperial College, London. The body of evidence for significant global warming is overwhelming. Wait a minute. We're going to listen to the projections of a group that can't even figure out the hoax of global warming? What else? They're into sustainable development. The Imperial College is. What is a sustainable development? That comes out of the United Nations. The Earth Summit in Rio back in the early 90s, known as Agenda 21, now called Agenda 2030. Here they have another report I found, climate change and the cost of capital in developing countries. Wait a minute, who's involved in that? The United Nations is involved in that report with them. And then we see that they're even whacked out on transgenderism. Imperial College in London to play host to the United Nations Gender Equality Campaign. On Thursday, 8th of October, Imperial will be welcoming the campaign bus for the UN's He for She initiative, a global solidarity movement for gender equality. Wait a minute, this is who we've been listening to? Bad idea. Well, look at what Breitbart said. Israeli expert, Trump right, World Health Organization wrong. Wait a minute, you mean the World Health Organization that's in tight with communist China and praises China? Like the report from the Rockefellers says how they're going to do a great job when this breaks out, their 2010 report? Or David Rockefeller, who praises the Chi-Coms? Well, Breitbart says the Israeli expert says Trump was right on the coronavirus death rate. In the final analysis, mortality rates for the coronavirus originally cited by President Donald Trump are going to be proven more accurate than the higher numbers claimed by the World Health Organization, according to an Israeli expert in epidemic modeling. Quote, do you know what's most absurd? Asked Dr. Dan Yemen. Quote, that in the final analysis, Trump was right. Not that the coronavirus is just a plain flu. It obviously isn't. But as he put it, quote, this is just my hunch. Way under 1% will die, end quote. Yemen heads the Laboratory for Epidemic Modeling and Analysis in Tel Aviv's University's engineering faculty, where he has developed models for predicting the spread of infectious diseases. In an interview with Israeli's Horowitz newspaper, Yemen agreed with Trump's assessment earlier this month that the World Health Organization's 3.4% global fatality rate for the coronavirus is too high. Quote, well, I think the 3.4% is really a false number, end quote. Trump told that to Fox News on March 4th. So what do we see they did? They took a crisis, a real threat, something that apparently maybe came out of a biolab, something that clearly, as we saw in our show last Sunday night, available now at wvwtv.com, that China deliberately spread on purpose. That was part one of our two-part series on are Russia and China preparing for war with the United States? The answer is yes. We'll pick up this coming Sunday night at 8 p.m. on that two-part series to show you that indeed Russia and China are preparing for war, that their 1999 unrestricted warfare document written by the Communist Chinese and two of their Communist Chinese generals with the People's Liberation Army talked openly in 1999 about using bioweapons, among other things, hacking, EMP, but they could use these things for psychological warfare. Well, apparently they let it spread on purpose. And maybe the World Health Organization, which is in tight with them, was helping to destroy America this way. And the perfect timing is Trump backed them into a corner with a trade deal. And we know these globalists don't want Trump to get elected. If you go and listen to my radio show before Trump was elected, I think it was the day after he was elected, he was president-elect. If you go to that show, the day after he was president-elect, in my Situation Room, you'll see that I predicted that America was entering one of the most dangerous times in world history because of what the globalists would do to stop Trump, that Trump would not likely be a paper tiger, and that the Marxists are not going to give up ground in America. And I said they would probably even collapse the economy if they had to do that to keep him from winning again. Well, I think they just tried to do it. And I think it was not only the Chi-Coms and the World Health Organizations and the UN and these Fabian-aligned medical groups putting out these huge numbers of death, but the medical deep state walked him right into this trap, and they were reading right out of the Imperial College in London's report, and again, that's documented, and then somewhere along the way, he put the brakes on and said, this just isn't smelling right and adding up, and he backed away from this. And so, my friends, this is important. So it brings us right back to where we started, the Fabian window and how they stirred it up and fanned the flames to create a crisis, to remold it nearer to the harsh desire. Just as Democrat Representative said the other day, James Clyburn, as he told his caucus members that this was a, quote, tremendous opportunity to restructure things to fit our vision, end quote. My friends, we've got to be very careful. It's hard in these days because you want to do what's right. You want to be careful. And as Donald Trump said, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot. We've been educated. But folks, we've got to be very aware. Got to be very aware of the Fabian Socialists and their trap to destroy America and collapse our economy, and then use that crisis to advance their cause and remold not only America, the haven of the capitalist free market system, but to remold the world nearer to the heart's desire. Hope you'll join our VIP club right now and get yourself educated even more, and then support what we're doing by going to wvwtv.com/subscription, wvwtv.com/subscription. And if you join at the 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year rate, I'll send you Marxianity and my 6-hour docu-movie, Sabotage. Now, if you want to make a tax-deductible contribution, you can do that at wvwfoundation.com, wvwfoundation.com. Foundation.com. You also can use our mailing address and send a check there if you prefer. Folks, again, we've got another bill coming up, $5,000 we got to pay by Friday, and then another $10,000 in 2 weeks to finish paying off the $45,000 for redoing our website computer code. As I said, it's not a luxury, folks. We have to do it to keep this stuff updated and secure. So if you want to support us, now's the time to do it. wvwfoundation.com or joining the Situation Room at wvwtv.com/subscription. So tonight we've learned how they've taken advantage of the coronavirus crisis to remold America nearer to the heart's desire. And it could take America a long time to get over this, but the American people have also been tested. They've seen greatly in America, the Marxists have, the globalists have, how we'll respond. Our enemies have watched. And my friends, they've noticed the psychological shake that it did to us, and I expect them to do more because now they've got our number. But let's be leaders and awaken people to this and share this information so they can be people who are knowledgeable, because knowledge is power. And when people understand what's going on and they understand how we're being manipulated, I think that'll take away a lot of fear and cause them, frankly, to get angry and stand up for their God-given constitutional rights. Well, till next time, I'm Brannon Howse. Thanks for watching. Take care.